The year was 1527, and the deep jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula were no longer a safe haven. The air was heavy with the smoke of burned villages and the echo of clashing steel. Pedro de Valdez, a cruel conquistador obsessed with gold, led his unit deeper into the impenetrable undergrowth. They were chasing the legend of a city where even the dust on the roads shone like the sun. But the Maya were not merely victims. King Can Bolum and his high priest, Apuch, knew their time on the surface had ended. They could not allow the secret of their longevity and the purity of their gods to fall into the hands of men with cross and sword. When the first Spanish horses arrived at the edge of Eldorado's great plaza, the city appeared deserted. Apuch stood atop the great pyramid, holding an obsidian mirror in his hands. "Xibalba will receive us," he whispered, lifting the artifact toward the sky. A sunbeam reflected off the mirror into a network of crystals positioned throughout the city. The earth did not shake with anger. It began to transform. A mechanism the Maya had built over millennia set into motion. Massive stone blocks began to shift with mathematical precision, and water from the surrounding cenotes flooded channels that acted as a giant hydraulic lift. Pedro de Valdez charged into the plaza just as the golden spires began to submerge below ground level. He saw Apuch look at him one last time with the calmness of a man who knows time is on his side. The Spaniards drew their swords and rushed forward, but beneath their feet there was suddenly only an empty clearing covered in moss and ferns. Within minutes, all of Eldorado had descended into a gigantic cavern, perfectly concealed by both nature and Mayan magic. The city didn't vanish from the map. It simply moved where human greed could not reach. Deep within the earth, hundreds of feet below the roots of the ceiba trees, Eldorado lit up once more. This time, not by the sun, but by phosphorescent minerals and artificial light that Mayan scholars had perfected. Apuch descended the pyramid and looked at his people. "Here we shall be safe," he announced. "Here we shall guard the fountain of ages until the world above grows wise." While the conquistadors above dug in vain and cursed the jungle, the inhabitants of Eldorado prepared for a millennium of isolation. Time ceased to exist for them. They became the guardians of the eternal sun, hidden in the heart of the earth. 500 years later, the jungle hadn't changed, but the world around it had. Elias's Thorne, a man with a weathered face and eyes that had read thousands of forgotten scrolls, pushed through the dense undergrowth. In his hand, he gripped the old diary of Pedro de Valdez. To others, it was the rambling of a mad soldier, but to Elias, it was a map. "It has to be here, Elena," he said, turning to his wife. Elena, treating a small scratch on Mateo's hand, simply sighed. She was here for the family, not for myths. But her children, Mateo and Maya, looked at the jungle with awe. They felt something in the air the adults didn't, a quiet, rhythmic pulse of the earth. They reached a massive ceiba tree, its roots stretching like petrified snakes dozens of meters in every direction. "This tree is the axis of the world in Mayan mythology," Elias explained, clearing moss from the bark. Maya noticed a strange carving in the trunk. It looked like an eye. When she placed a small stone disc they had found in a temple antechamber into it, a deep thud echoed. It wasn't an earthquake, but the sound of ancient gears waking after centuries. The ground beneath the tree suddenly trembled, and the dust of ages began to fall into invisible cracks. "Everyone back!" Elena screamed, but it was too late. The ground beneath their feet, made of layers of roots and illusory stone, gave way. The Thorne family plunged into darkness, accompanied by screams and the sound of falling debris. But the fall wasn't fatal. They landed on a soft bed of bluish mass in a gigantic cavern. When Elias regained consciousness and switched on his flashlight, his breath hitched. The light didn't just hit rock, it reflected off pure gold. Before them lay a valley that shouldn't exist. A city of pyramids, gardens and canals, bathed in soft artificial light emanating from the cavern's ceiling. As the family recovered from the shock, figures began to emerge from the surrounding buildings. They were not savages, but people dressed in precious fabrics, wearing jewelry that shone like stars. Their skin was smooth and their eyes clear, as if they were all 20 years old. Leading them was a man Elias recognized from Codex drawings. Saput, he looked exactly as he did in 1527. "Welcome, travelers," Aport spoke in archaic Mayan, which Elias miraculously understood. "For 500 years we have waited for someone with the courage to follow the shadow of steel. You are the first from the surface to see Eldorado and remain alive." Orpuch led the Thorne family into a palace where tables groaned under exotic fruits and drinks in jade cups. Elias was in a trance. He could touch history that should have been long dead. "How is this possible?" he asked, watching Mayan girls who looked as if they were carved from marble. "Your city is a biological miracle?" Apuche only smiled faintly and gestured toward a massive pool in the center of the hall, where water cascaded from the heart of the mountain. "We drink from the fountain of ages," he explained. "The earth gives us blood that stops decay. In Eldorado, there is no old age, only an eternal now." Elena, however, as a doctor, felt an inner unease. When Apuch allowed her to glimpse their healing chambers, she discovered something terrifying. The citizens of Eldorado weren't just healthy, they were dependent on the spring water. Without the minerals from the depths, their cells began to disintegrate within hours. "Elias, this isn't a gift," she whispered to her husband in the privacy of their gold-lined room. "It's a biological bond. If we start drinking their water, we can never go back to the surface. Our bodies wouldn't survive a single sunset out there." Meanwhile, Mateo and Maya were exploring the terrace gardens. They encountered an old man sitting by a canal, staring into space. Unlike the others, he looked weary. "How long have you been here?" Mateo asked. The man looked at him with eyes filled with millennial boredom. "I don't remember the names of my children who stayed above when the city sank," he replied softly. "We know everything about the stars, but we've forgotten the smell of the wind after rain. A port she gave us eternity, but he took away the meaning of life. We are just exhibits in his golden museum." Elias began to understand that their welcome wasn't just a gesture of hospitality. Alpach needed new blood, new stories, to keep his people from falling into total apathy. And Elias tried to find the way back to the shaft under the ceiba tree. He found the entrance vanished beneath a massive stone slab. "The way back is closed until you decide," Elpach's voice echoed behind him. "Be our guests forever, become gods among men, or return to your world of dust and oblivion. But remember, the gate opens only once in a generation." The atmosphere in Eldorado had shifted. A porch was no longer just a kind host. He had become a shadow, watching their every move. Tomorrow, during the eclipse of the inner sun, the ritual of acceptance will take place, he announced at dinner. Elias looked at his family. Before them stood cups filled with water from the fountain of ages. They knew that one sip would forever sever their bond with the outside world. Mateo and Maya didn't even touch the water. Their desire to see real stars again and feel cold rain was stronger than the promise of a 1,000-year life of luxury. Elias realized his archaeological dream was turning into a nightmare for his children. Alina used her medical knowledge to her advantage. She discovered that the mechanism that had once lowered the city was powered by hydraulics, connected to the fountain's main flow. If we change the pressure in the central pipe, the mechanical gates will open for a moment, she whispered to Elias at night. They had to act fast. The guards in Eldorado weren't used to resistance. Centuries of peace had made them confident but slow. The Thornes slipped out of the palace, using the shadows of Mayan temples cast by phosphorescent crystals on the cavern ceiling. Every footstep on the golden pavement sounded like a gunshot. On their way to the city's technical heart, they were stopped by the man they had met in the garden. "I will help you," he said quietly, handing Elias a heavy bronze key. "I will do what I should have done hundreds of years ago. I want someone to tell the world that we were once human." With his help, they reached the main valve of the fountain. The water roared here like a trapped giant. Elias had to decide if he damaged the pipe, the city would slowly begin to flood. Eldorado wouldn't be destroyed, but it would have to change its location after centuries. To a port, it was betrayal. To Elias, it was the only way to freedom. As Elias leaned into the lava, a metallic screech echoed through the halls of Eldorado. Water began spraying from the joints, and the system pressure dropped sharply. At that moment, all the alarm lights flared. "Thieves of time," roared the voice of Op Urch, echoing from speakers carved into the stone. The high priest appeared on the balcony of his pyramid, his eyes glowing with the rage of a god whose toys are being taken away. "Do you think you can leave? Your bodies have already smelled the fountain. Outside, only dust awaits you." The Thorne family didn't wait and sprinted toward the main shaft as the water level began to rise beneath them. The water from the Fountain of Ages had already flooded Eldorado's lower terraces, turning the golden city into a shimmering lake. Elias, Elena, and the children ran up the spiral staircase leading to the main shaft beneath the ceiba tree. Arpuch's voice pursued them like thunder. "Without my water, you will age in an instant. Your skin will wrinkle and your bones will grow brittle. Stay." Elias paused for a moment and looked back at the magnificent city. It was the hardest moment of his life, leaving eternity for an uncertain future. But then he saw the fear in his children's eyes and knew that no gold in the world could outweigh the freedom of their souls. At the shaft entrance, Opuch awaited them. He looked monstrous, surrounded by the glow of crystals that began to short-circuit from the moisture. "Let us go," Elias said firmly, aiming a high-powered flashlight at him, the beam blinding the high priest. Opuch, who for centuries had known no brightness other than the cavern's dreamlike light, shielded his face with his hands. At that moment, the mechanical slab, powered by residual water pressure, began to rumble open. "Go!" Elena screamed, pushing the children into the narrow vent where the first light of a real day began to seep through. They climbed up through the roots of the ceiba tree as Eldorado began to shift once more below them. Arpuch and his people had decided to hide the city even deeper to stop the flooding. As Elias was the last to scramble to the surface, the ground closed beneath him with finality. The Thorne family lay in the mud in the middle of the Guatemalan jungle. They were dirty, tired, and scared, but as they looked up, they saw a sky full of stars through the canopy. Alina immediately checked the pulse of her children and husband. "It's still us," she breathed with relief. Arpuch's warning had been the final lie of a prison guard. In the morning, a rescue party found them. Elias sat at the base of the ceiba tree, clutching a small piece of Mayan jade that had fallen from his pocket. "Did you find it, Dad?" Mateo asked as they approached the helicopter. Elias looked at the tree, which now appeared like any other in the jungle, and then at his family. He knew that if the world found out the truth about Eldorado, humanity would destroy it with greed. "No, son," Elias replied, tossing the jade deep into the undergrowth. "Eldorado is just a legend. Some secrets are too beautiful to be discovered." The Thorne family flew toward their ordinary, short but beautifully colorful life.